Hi everybody, Heather here.
And I'm Cassie.
And we're talking selfishly about my favorite fabric.
Yeah, specifically for beginners.
Yes, okay, excuse me. My favorite fabrics that also work well for beginners. But whether or not you're a beginner, we're just gonna like have a little fabric chat right now and kind of talk a little bit about what we like and what we don't like and maybe your experiences with it and my experiences with it. We're gonna show you like some examples of things sewn up because I think I just taught a class in London teaching people how to make shirts.
Yeah.
And about once a year, pre-COVID, I used to go to London once a year and teach. And it's been a couple of years since I taught in person. And I was just realizing like, oh, this is so important for me to go and do this once a year. Because I feel like I get really deeply reconnected with like where people are in their sewing journey. Because day to day, like I kind of forget that not everybody has been sewing for 10 years. And so just seeing the things that people struggle with and seeing the things that are confusing. I'm like, it's always like revitalizing for me to come back. And then, as we're thinking about like helping people learn all this stuff, like, oh, these are the things that people stumble with. And so one of the things my students were stumbling with or were struggling with their shirts was just like the fabrics that they chose.
Yeah.
And, shirts, you think of a button down, you think like a really stable cotton. And one of my students had chosen a kind of like drapey, it's like maybe like a tencel or a rayon blend.
Yeah.
And they were really struggling with it. And I think they probably bought it online and it said shirting and they were like, great.
Yeah.
But not all shirtings are created equal. So we're going to kind of like get into this and talk about things from like easy to hard.
Yeah.
And then, maybe this will explain some things to you, any questions you have about fabric. And of course, if you have any other questions about fabric, let us know because we love making videos. So I'm happy to make more videos talking about fabric.
It's true. We could talk about this forever. And I do think that picking a fabric to match the pattern is like a skill in itself that sometimes comes with time, but we can hopefully help make that a little bit easier today.
Yeah, totally. And specifically, we're going to talk about wovens because knits are like their whole other category. So specifically, I'm going to talk about the kind of wovens that I think I like sewing with and that we tend to use a lot, like pulling kind of example garments for some of these fabrics is fun because I can see we just sometimes use the same fabrics over and over because we like them. So I think that's a good sign. Okay, so the first fabric that I love sewing with and that I think is probably like the number one best option for sewers if you're like really getting started is either like a cotton poplin or a cotton broadcloth.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that for sure.
So when we say broadcloth is basically like, is essentially a very simple one-on-one weave. And most, like all quilting cotton, for example, is broadcloth.
Okay.
And so broadcloth to me is like a not super tight, not super fine woven cotton that is very stable and, often is dyed a million different colors and is printed a million different colors versus a poplin, which is the same kind of one-on-one weave, but the fibers and the threads used to create the fabric are like much finer and silkier. And so the final effect is like a smoother handed fabric.
Cool. I didn't actually know that.
So here we go. Here's an example. This is our, oh my gosh, this
Azure.
is Azure. Thank you. We have a lot of patterns and I don't always remember what they are. So this is a Azure dress. This is this gorgeous tier dress that we did last year for crew. And this is made out of a poplin. And so the face of it is quite smooth. Like if you touch it, it's like quite soft and smooth. And it is really easy to sew with, right? And it's like, it doesn't shift. It's just like you cut it. And then when you go to sew your seams, like they're not moving around on you. And then because it's got that smooth face, it really takes prints well.
Yeah.
So you can find a lot of really pretty poplin prints. I do not have an example today of a broadcloth, but you can just imagine it's a similar texture or similar weave, but a little bit more rustically woven. The one thing is with a cotton poplin though, is it does wrinkle.
Yeah.
There's no synthetic in it. And because it's kind of crisp, like you can just like tell if I just like scrunch it.
And this has just been hanging and it's a little wrinkly.
Yeah, it's just like a little tiny wrinkle. I mean, what do you do? Like my cure for wrinkles, because we have a lot of people asking us like what fabrics that they should use for traveling. And my thing is, I think just get a travel steamer.
Yeah, it's the best. I always pack a travel steamer.
So I just have a little one. It's that or you're like wearing polyester, right? It's the only thing that doesn't wrinkle. So I have a little travel steamer and I always make room in my suitcase for that. And then I'm not really worried about wrinkles. Or then there's the other trick of you put the thing in the shower while you're having a shower. Having said that, there are some poplins that are a little bit trickier. An example would be like a really, really crisp poplin, like the one that we use to make our...
Yeah. Oh, you're forgetting the name.
Trozzo.
Trozzo dress.
This is so scary. Like, I'm only like not even in my mid 40s, and I'm like cannot remember anything that I've ever done in my life. Trozzo. Thank you.
The July crew pattern.
So we recommended kind of a crisp cotton like poplin for this pattern, and then we designed a crisp poplin explicitly to go with it. And it's like this particular poplin is like very crisp and like almost like papery and like crunchy because it has this like amazing ability to hold its shape.
You can see in the sleeve how well it
like holds its shape. And this one, like you will never get, you're like, it's more challenging to press. Like you're never going to get like a glass finish on this kind of poplin. It's always going to have a little bit of that surface texture just because it's so tightly woven. So I would say put this in a slightly more challenging category of poplin because it's so tightly woven. That's where you get this like crispness. Basically the space between those fibers is smaller, and there's probably, if you were to look at it in a magnifying glass, there's like more threads per square inch than there is in something like a broadcloth. The needle, it's like you need a microtex needle almost to like puncture it, and it does show, like it'll show a hole. Like if you're sewing and you rip something out, it'll wash out eventually, but you do see those marks when you like do a seam rip.
Yeah.
So if you're like just getting started and you are a seam ripping person and you make a lot of mistakes, I would maybe be like,
yeah, it might be overwhelming too, and you get scared, and you don't want to feel like you can't seam rip something.
Yeah, so I would recommend like a poplin that's on the softer, maybe a little bit less like crisp hand. And then in that same category of like poplins, so then you have like your lighter weight cottons. So here we have an example of, I think this is a batiste. So this is where people get confused.
Yeah.
They're like, what is a batiste?
There's a lot of cottons.
What's a voile? There's a lot of different kind of cotton terms, but basically batiste is a very lightweight. It's also kind of that broadcloth weave, but it's just softer and it's lighter weight and it weighs less and it's a little bit airier.
Yeah.
So I also like a batiste, but I would say it's more of a summer weight cotton.
Yeah, it's really lightweight.
Yeah, like it's like fluttery. So if you wanted to go into a batiste or voile has a similar kind of weight. I think voile might be a little bit lighter weight. And generally with voiles, like there'll be like a white voile and it'll be like a Victorian blouse or something. Yeah. And that's what they were making all those like beautiful Victorian blouses out of, is like very fine, lightweight cottons.
Yeah.
So also
semi-sheer.
Sewing with those. However, again, cotton, a lot of million different options. I also love like a more rustically woven. So actually this would be a good example of a broadcloth. Mm-hmm. So like, how does that feel to you?
This is my favorite fabric. It's
like ever?
Like one of them. Like I sewed with my little like plaid pants. I sewed in this fabric. And
so this is an artisanal. So this, what I love about this cotton, it's an artisanal cotton. It is hand woven on a loom without any electricity in India by these like artisan communities. There's like this very strong weaving community, culture and communities in India. And we work with co-ops there to produce these cottons. And so they are literally not made with electricity. It's wild. And it's somebody with like a shuttle loom, like literally manually like weaving them in different colors.
And it has a really like slubby feel to it. Like it's quite textured. You can look at it and you can see the texture, and then you feel it, and you can also feel there's like little bumps, but it's so nice and rustic, and
it washes up really nice.
Washes up beautifully.
So I would say in the cotton family, like I love like an artisanal hand woven cotton. And then like I said, this is like a kind of classic broadcloth. But what is so lovely about these is exactly what you say. Like, I think they like just wear and wash really well. And they just like over the course of years just get like softer and more rumply and more delicious. So here is like kind of a more rustic cotton. Okay. How many favorite cottons does Heather have? So a lot. The other thing I love and I'm obsessed with and like search time love for is a perfect Oxford, because I love men's button-down shirts. And until we did our Jenna shirt, I would go to the thrift store and I would try to find like like a vintage Ralph Lauren men's dress shirt. And they're always in these like beautiful Oxfords. And so Oxford, if you'll have to, let's see if I can remember this. Okay, so an Oxford is also a crossing weave.
Yes.
Is this the technical term? It's a crossing weave.
Crossing weave.
But instead of having, so like a broadcloth would have like one warp and one weft thread. An Oxford has two kind of running parallel to selvage and then one running perpendicular to the selvage. And that's how you get, like if you were to zoom in on this, it's basically creates the surface texture. So basically different types of fabrics have different, like a twill weave is woven, like it is woven to look like it's on the diagonal. And this one has got this kind of texture. And depending on the Oxford, it could be tight or loose, but I think generally they have like a slightly thicker thread.
Yeah.
So it's not like a really fine shirting like a really fine Italian Pima cotton dress shirt that's like almost silky because the threads are so thin. An Oxford, they're a little bit thicker. And so these do tend to fray a little bit.
Yeah, it is weighty.
Yeah. Because like in general, the larger the thread in the fabric, it tends to be a little bit more loosely woven and more likely to ravel slightly on the seams. So when I'm like cutting a seam on a shirt, like the hem, and especially if it's cut on a curve, like it tends to kind of unravel a little bit.
Do that while you're sewing.
But if you use like a really tight poplin, it won't do that because there's so many threads and they're so tightly woven that it's like harder for it to unravel.
Yeah. This is really nice to sew with though. It presses really well.
Did you make anything with this one?
Yeah, I made my Jenna shirt. My yellow Jenna shirt.
Yes, okay. Sorry, Cassie made the coolest Jenna shirt with like all of the different colors.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, okay. So she like color blocked it, all these, like it's very kind of preppy Nantucket vibe. And does it not get super soft with wear?
Well, that was the striped shirting, but I did make a yellow Jenna in this Oxford, and it was so good. Both of them were really nice, the shirting and this one as well.
But the thing about an Oxford I love is that it gets really, really soft.
It gets so soft.
Like I have vintage Oxford shirts that are like falling apart, like literally falling apart, but I don't want to get rid of them yet because they still somewhat go on my body, like they're my gardening shirts. So Oxford, love an Oxford, very beginner friendly, but note that it may have a little tendency to fray if you like cut it on a curve.
Yeah, I remember teaching a friend to sew, and the fabric that we were working with did fray a bit, and that was a bit of a stressor for her as we were going. But I think if you can just like approach it very calmly, like it's okay, it's gonna fray, it's gonna.
That's remember the nature of it. When most woven patterns have a 5/8 seam allowance, so even if it frays like a 1/4 of an inch, you still have like a very viable area. So don't let it stress you out too much. The only time I get really stressed out about a fraying seam is if it's like very loosely woven, it's like a coating or something, or like a tweed or a boucle, and we're talking about like big chunky threads. Those I will serge the edge before I sew it to help kind of like contain the raveling. But with something like an Oxford, I'm not gonna stress out about it. But for context of like what that Oxford looks like when it's sewn up, Oxford, it's got a bit of structure, so it stands up well to things like collars and lapels and pockets and stuff like that. But and so there's a degree of crispness to it, but it does kind of soften up with wear.
It's not stiff. It's crisp, but it's not stiff.
Yes, that's like one of these hard things that how do you describe? It's crisp, but it's not stiff. That's what it is. Okay, so that's kind of like my preference for cottons. I think we kind of talked about beginning, be more beginner friendly. And I would say if you're then like, okay, I've sewn with cotton, I feel very comfortable with that. What would be the next step? And it would be,
I would say linen.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is linen. Answer is correct. The answer is linen. And I feel like we need to acknowledge this because we were talking in an earlier video about how much we loved linen for beginners. And a few people were like, actually, no, guys, linen's challenging because it frays.
Yeah.
But I think that kind of comes down, and again, it frays because most linens have a larger thread.
Yeah.
And so when they're woven together, they have a tendency to fray. Let's see if I could like get a little fray going on this sample yardage here. Like I'm sure you can even see on camera like how thick these threads are compared to some of those cottons. And so they do tend to fray a little bit.
No big deal.
But it's not a big deal.
No.
And I think where it might become a problem is if you're like really handling the fabric a lot and you're like seam ripping a lot and you're like manipulating the seams a lot, it might have a point where you're like, ooh, like I've really jacked up the seam allowance.
Yeah.
But I think in general, linens are pretty easy to work with because they are stable. They don't have a lot of like movement on the table. Like when you're cutting them, that's always my standard for like how tricky a fabric is like when you put it on the table, if it's like sliding around and it's getting all distorted. If you put linen down and you weigh your pieces down, like it's not going to,
it's not going to shift.
No, it maintains its kind of structural integrity. And again, kind of coming back to this artisanal cotton, one of the things I love about linen is I love that texture of linen.
Me too.
There's like a thing about linen, like it looks organic. It looks like it came from something that grew in the ground. And I love that.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't like the wrinkles. How do you feel about linen wrinkles?
I'm like, it's part of it. It's part of,
right?
Yeah. I mean, some linens, like a heavier weight linen is going to be less wrinkly than like a lighter weight linen, I find. But at the same time, it's like, if you're wearing linen, you're moving in it, you're sitting, you're doing your thing, like it's just going to naturally like crease with your body. And I actually really like that.
I do too. I feel like it just says like, I'm a chill human.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like a laid back. Am I a laid back chill human? No, but I'm just communicating that I'm like a laid back chill human that is
easy breezy.
Easy breezy. Like I'm not sweating. I'm in linen right now.
Yeah.
So this is a mid-weight linen, and one of the things that I love about linen, one of the reasons I think it's a good beginner-friendly fabric, is because it works in a lot of different contexts. Mm-hmm. So, example. Here is these are our Pietra pants. So this is a bottom. They work beautifully in a linen of this weight. So it's like an actual linen can be bottom weight. And actually, I've also made a really cool pant that I don't have because I wore them last night. Then they got thrown in the laundry and I forgot to bring them. But I made them out of a lightweight linen, and I can even make a bottom out of a lightweight linen.
Yeah.
But you want something that has lots of ease. Like I wouldn't make like a skinny jean.
No.
In linen.
No.
I welcome you to try and show us, but I feel like all your seams would end up like splitting into center. So you can make bottoms with linen, but like you want to have like room for your body to move around, because linen doesn't have like a ton of recovery, so it's not going to like stretch out your body. But then you can also make something like a like structured dress.
The best.
Semi-structured. So this was Micah from our crew collection this year. And we used this mid-weight linen, and it was just perfect. So it's like great for tops, it's great for skirts, it's great for dresses, it's great for pants. So that's kind of like, it's a great all-around workhorse fabric. And I feel like if you ever have a couple yards of fabric in your stash and a pattern comes out that you love, chances are you could just probably make it with linen.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, it presses really nicely. It doesn't move on the table when you use it. These are all things that are ideal for beginners, but also just, even if you're not a beginner, it's just a pleasant sewing experience. Like, totally. Even if you can sew with all the fabrics, there's, you tend to love certain fabrics more than others, and yeah, it's just delightful to work with.
Linen's my favorite. Yeah. This particular mid-weight linen from Core Fabrics is my like probably #1 favorite fabric of all time, which I feel like is really saying something, but I've made so many things in this over the years. We make so many like every year or every month when we have patterns coming out, I'm like, can we just use mid-weight linen? Everyone's like, well, we use it 100 times. I'm like, I know, but it's the best. Everyone's like, yeah, I know. So we just use it over and over again because I really love it. But that said, it is like, I don't know, I think the GSM, it's around 200 GSM. So it's a bit more of a mid-weight, but then you can also get linen in lots of different weights. So you mentioned like a heavyweight linen, which can be really nice for like outerwear. Like I've seen really pretty like jackets, like something like our Sienna Maker jacket, for example, looks great in a heavyweight linen. You can use a lot of times like an upholstery weight linen will work for garments for like bags and bottoms and coats.
Yeah.
And we did talk a little bit about lightweight linen, and here's an example of one from Core Fabrics.
So nice.
So what is the lightweight about it? Again, I think if you were to look at the fibers that like make this fabric under a microscope, the fibers, the threads are smaller and thinner than these ones. So they're woven the same way, but it's just the thickness of the fiber is what gives it, the thickness of the thread is what gives it its kind of heft.
You can see it in person too.
I'm looking at these two, and you can just tell, like, you would just look like with your eye, see that these threads are bigger. And because these are a little bit smaller, it's a little bit crisper, it's a little bit airier, it's a little bit lighter. And so I like using a lightweight linen for basically like warm, like, you can use linen all year round. It is a fallacy. Do you have any linen garments you wear in the winter?
Pants all the time.
Yeah.
I have a pair of like medium weight linen pants that I wear all year round.
Yeah, and I have a couple dresses that are really cozy that I like wearing in linen, but I would say like a lightweight linen is more summer vibes.
Yeah, for sure.
midweight all year round, lightweight linen, more like, depends on where you live. For us, it would be like June to August. And then basically it's a wintry hell.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we switch back to our midweight linen. I feel like I miscategorized this in terms of fabrics that I love to sew with. And this is actually FLC because I don't know if I love sewing with double gauze. Do you make stuff in double gauze?
It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one.
Like what I love about double gauze is wearing. Like
it feels amazing.
Like once the garment is made and it's on your body, you're like,
you feel like a little baby.
Yeah.
You're just like
cozy little baby.
Yeah.
It does. It feels like in a good way, like adult clothes, baby clothes made for adults. So what is beautiful about double gauze? So essentially it's like two kind of loosely woven, light, airy layers of cotton that are kind of woven together. And that's what you get, like when you see that surface texture on double gauze, it's essentially those two layers being kind of captured together with that attaching stitch. But I find because the layers are so loosely woven, it does stretch and distort.
Yeah.
It's not as stable as like a cotton poplin. So I would not recommend it for like your first project.
No, I would do a couple, get a few in the can. It's not impossible, and but it is trickier. It's just inherently a little bit trickier.
Like I think on the table it doesn't shift, but when you're going to sew it, it's just you'll feel like the seams just feel a little bit more delicate.
Yeah.
So not my favorite fabric to sew with, and I don't actually sew with it that often, but I have a few garments in double gauze that I love to wear. So sometimes you have to suffer.
It's true.
Okay, so before we get into the heavier weight fabrics, I feel like we're going to take a little journey.
Okay, where are we going?
Drapeland.
Drapeland. Are you draping?
How do you feel about drapey fabrics?
I actually do like drapey fabrics, wearing them. Sewing them.
So you're like a drapey, you feel about drapey fabrics the way I feel about double gauze.
Yeah, I do. But the thing is, like, I just love the, like, as being like just like this feeling.
The flow.
The flow. Like you got really great flow today.
I do.
I'm wearing just breezing around the office.
I'm wearing a Vico Vero rayon twill weave. It's a periwinkle dress from Crew last year. And this is like, it's so soft and it's got so flowy and it just like moves with your body and it makes you feel like doing interpretive dance.
Yeah.
However, some are harder than others, and so I just pulled out some that are like a little bit easier to sew with. So if I just am, like today I did a whole thing in cupro, and I made a dress in like 3 hours. So I would put that on the easier. But anyways, I want to talk a little bit about what a drapey fabric is. So essentially drapey fabric, if we're like coming back around to this idea of the weave, a drapey fabric, the threads that make the weave are very fine, like teeny tiny fine.
Yeah, and you can notice it when you're sewing too. The ends will fray a little bit and you can see how thin they are.
Yeah, it's like very thinly woven, and then on top of that, like a lot of drapey fabrics tend to be made out of viscose, and viscose, I think the inherent like thread, if you took like a viscose thread and a cotton thread, it would just naturally like have more drape to it because it's just the structural, I don't know, I'm not a chemist, but there's like a structural component to it that is inherently more drapey. And so most drapey fabrics are made out of viscose. Sometimes they'll be like woven. So if you were like, ooh, I want to dip my foot in the drapey pool, but I know that they're shifty and annoying, what would be a good starter fabric? And I would say you want to go with something like a blend, like our linen.
Yeah, it's the best. It's just
like our textured viscose linen.
It's so nice to sew with.
It is like the best of both worlds. So it's got the linen in it that gives it a little bit of stability, and it gives it that breathability. And this has got like quite a bit, like a scrunch it.
Yeah, it's so nice.
It's like almost beefy, like it's got like a real weight to it. And so it's drapey, like you can see, like it's got a beautiful drape, but it just isn't quite as shifty as like maybe a rayon challis.
Yeah.
And also because it has the surface texture, when you're aligning like your pattern pieces together and you're sewing your seams, they kind of like lock.
Yeah, exactly. I actually, when I was teaching the same friend, I was talking about how to sew, we sewed with this fabric, and it shifted a little bit while she sewed, but overall, like for her first time sewing a garment, it worked really well. It was really nice.
And so here's like a shirt, for instance, just to see how it hangs. You can see how drapey it is. We did this is the marble shell, and we did it in a bunch of different colors of this fabric. And I think like when Judith was sewing this, she's like, I love this fabric. So easy to sew.
Yeah, it's really delightful. It just feels nice.
So it doesn't have to be this one, but I would just say like look for maybe textured blends, cotton viscose, tencel viscose, linen viscose that have a little bit of like surface texture, and they'll probably have a little less structure. So the shiftiness.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
But coming back around to other viscoses that are easier to sew with is, again, coming to like a surface texture. So I don't know if you can see this on camera. This is, again, Periwinkle. It's the same pattern I'm wearing now. But this is a viscose crepe. So it's got this like how would you describe that?
It's kind of like papery, almost like, I don't know how.
It's almost a little crunchy.
Yeah, it has a sound.
Yeah, it's like a crunchy sound.
Yeah.
And there's like, it's crepe, so it's got this like crepey texture. And again, when you're going to sew this, it is drapey, so it's shifty. It's going to shift a little bit when you're cutting it. But again, when you're going to sew it, because it's crepe, I find that the like layers tend to stick together a little bit more than like a really fine rayon challis where they don't really have anything to grip onto. Here's another example of a kind of like crepey viscose. We made a Jenna shirt dress out of this.
It's so nice. And it's got like a natural other sort of like texture.
But you can see it's just like they kind of stick together.
Yeah.
So I like a crepe. I think that's a good, slightly more beginner friendly texture.
Yeah.
The other one that is kind of good, like in the good beginner spectrum, again, I wouldn't say this is your first project, but if you want to dip your toe in, is like a tencel. Have you sewn anything in tencel?
Yeah, not for a while.
Tencel twill specifically?
Yeah, I have. It's really nice. It feels really nice to wear. I find it is a bit shifty, but overall it doesn't, I think it's great.
Like if I'm going to give it a shifty scale of like no shift to shifty AF, I would put it like in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
So these are like, and we made, I think these are Carolyn pajama pants. And so this is a tencel twill. So tencel basically is just a proprietary, if you're ever like, what is tencel? Tencel and YSL are exactly the same thing, but tencel is just like the branded version of it. Like Band-Aid is a Band-Aid, and like Kleenex, we call Kleenex. But essentially they're all just a version of YSL. And it's just a more sustainable form of, it's essentially a viscose. They're most of the time made from wood, from forests, trees. And I know for sure tencel's like, it's all FSC. They're responsibly managed forests, but that's where the kind of raw material is coming from. And so tencel twill, it's got a twill weave. So when they weave it together, it's woven in a way that it looks like it's woven on the diagonal. It's still like the structure of it is still this, but it looks kind of like it's on the diagonal. And it's like nice for drapey fabric because it has a bit more weight than, again, something like this is a little bit lighter. This has got a little bit more of a heft to it. Yeah. And it is more in that middle of the shifty as AF scale. So I do like a tencel, and I would say tencel is probably a good option if you're like, again, dipping your toe into shifty and wanting to try something. Okay, another favorite fabric of all time. A little bit trickier to sew with, but I think on the beginner spectrum, not brutal, is cupro. So cupro is made from cotton linter thread, so it's basically the leftovers left over from cotton production. And then it is, you know, in this chemical process, they make these really fine fibers, and when it is woven, it basically looks like and feels like sandwash silk. Like, would you think that was silk if you didn't?
Yeah, for sure. For sure, I would.
I just freaking love cupro. So it's got the breathability of cotton, but it's got that like suede hand, and just like the twill, what I like about it is that it's kind of a little bit more on mid-weight level. It's not like a super lightweight fabric. So again, it's a little shifty, but it's not as shifty as like a silk crepe de chine. And I was just sewing with it today, and I actually found again that those layers kind of, when you're sewing, kind of grip together. So I wasn't even really using pins, because as I was sewing the seams, I could just kind of like put them in place with my fingers, and they stayed that way. I do find with cupro, I don't know why this is, hems tend to get distorted. So every time I go to sew a hem, I'm like folding up all my seam allowances, and inevitably like something weird shifts, and my hems kind of always look like crap on the inside because I end up having to like ease them in. So I think it's just the nature of sometimes sewing with drapey fabrics is just needing to be a little bit flexible, that they are going to have a mind of their own. There's nothing wrong with you. I've been sewing for I don't know how many, a billion years, And if I showed you the inside of the hems of this garment, you would be like, are you okay? And I'm like, it's not me, it's the cupro. I'm trying to see if there's like an example in here. So here I am trying to say it's a little bit more beginner friendly, but I think it's just, you just have to accept that that's going to be the case. And from the outside, nobody can tell that the inside of the hem doesn't look great. You know what I mean? I just love it. So again, I would maybe go with like a tencel twill and then dip your toe in with a cupro.
Yeah, I haven't worked with cupro, but I've always been cupro curious.
Ooh. Well, satiate your curiosity, Cassie. Yeah. It's really lovely and it feels so nice on your body. It does
like really nice, just touching it.
Silky.
Yeah, it's all about that.
So then I have some bottom weights. I love a bottom weight for a beginner.
Yeah.
Talk about stability. If you can get a heavier weight cotton, this is our textured or tumbled cotton. So what's the GSM on here? 160 GSM. And if I lay this out on the table, like it is not going anywhere. Like when I'm going to cut, this fabric is just like maintaining its integrity. When you go to sew it, it's going to stick together. This particular like cotton has a bit of a surface texture again, so it's like really grippy.
Yeah.
This is great stuff.
It's super nice.
So again, like I don't know what other fabric stores are carrying, but anything in the mid-weight cotton, like if they call it a bottom weight cotton and it's 100% cotton, that's a really good beginner friendly fabric. It's not gonna shift around too much on you. And this would be great for like pants, shorts.
Yeah.
We've made like kind of structured dresses. I think we made a Pauline little mini dress out of this. We made our Mitchell trousers, our like wide leg Mitchell trousers. So nice. So very great option. And then recently, actually, here they are. There's the Mitchell trousers. So you wouldn't think looking at that cotton that it would be good for pants, but it was like the perfect fabric.
It's so nice
for these pants.
Hold the pleats really nice.
Yeah, it has a bit of drape, so they're not too stiff. And then last year we also introduced this, like we were calling it a substantial cotton. So the GSM on this is 250. So this was 160. This is 250. So this is like on its way to being a canvas, but not quite a canvas.
Yeah, it's definitely lighter weight.
And it's like almost has like a lightweight denim.
Yeah,
feeling.
It's so nice.
But it's a broadcloth, so it's like it's a one-on-one weave, but it's just got like a nice heft. And this I love for pants. It's like my favorite fabric for pants right now. And then also for bags, like I'm gonna make the Core Fabrics belt bag.
Oh yeah.
And I think I'm gonna be using these because it's like got the perfect kind of like texture. Have you made that yet?
I haven't yet.
Okay, we should make our own and like make a YouTube video about it.
Yeah,
because when I was in Europe,
I love a sling bag.
Everybody is doing a crossbody belt bag, and I'm old, and I'm like, oh, like a fanny pack?
No,
everyone's like, no, we don't call them that. We don't wear them like that anymore. It's crossbody.
We don't refer to that era.
I remember. Almost getting to the end. Cotton twill.
That's such a fun color. I love that.
Yeah, it's not really going with our palette, our like subdued autumn palette.
I love it.
I would never wear this, but I love this color. But you're a spring and I'm not.
I know.
I'm kind of like an autumn with winter rising.
Yeah.
But I think you're a pure spring.
Yeah, I am.
But like that looks, with your blue eyes, so pretty. But cotton twill is another great beginner fabric, and you can get it kind of anywhere. And again, like amazing for bottoms. And I also love it for coats.
Oh, yeah. It's so nice.
So this is our sandstone coat, just to give you an example. So this is like a midweight cotton twill. It's 235 GSM. So it's actually weight per kind of meter is actually a little bit lighter weight than that substantial cotton. Mm-hmm. But you can just see it, like it's the perfect weight for a coat. Yeah. It's dense. It's got that twill weave, so it's got like that diagonal, but it's super, super, super easy to sew with.
Yeah. It's really nice.
Super easy to sew with. And I love cotton twill because I think it like ages really nice. Mm-hmm. And if you were to wear this and wash this coat a lot, like around the seam edges, it would start to fade.
Yeah.
And then in like 5 or 10 years, you just get that like really like washed love to kind of texture on all of the seams that I love. So cotton twill, big fan. Pants, bottoms, bags, coats. Even dresses, you can do like a skirt, like a structured,
like a shift dress.
A shift dress,
so cute.
Or a structured like mini skirt. Yeah, those all work well on a cotton twill. And again, it just depends on the weight, because you can get like lightweight cotton twills that I don't know if it's like a 5-ounce cotton twill, maybe I wouldn't want to make like a pant with it. It depends. I'm like mixing now my ounces and my GSMs because I'm just neither here nor there. I live in both systems, imperial and metric. Okay. Last but not least, I want to talk about cotton canvas. Have you?
Yes, I have sewn it with it and I love it.
So would you put it on the hard? I would maybe put cotton canvas a little bit on the harder spectrum. It's so stable,
yeah,
but it's thick.
Yeah, so where the issue comes in is your machine and whether or not your machine has the capacity to handle thick fabrics or like thick seams. So it does sort of depend on what you're making. If you're making jeans, might be a little trickier at those parts like the belt loop.
Yeah. So here's an example. This is actually a free pattern from Core Fabrics. It's a tote bag. This is like the extra large edition.
I love that.
And so where you might struggle as a beginner with sewing really thick fabrics is when you have like a lot of layers like this. And we just had somebody in our jean making class who was trying to get help with their waistband because they were like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but my machine just keeps like skipping stitches, and they sent some photos. And we're giving them all these tips, and I gave all this advice about how they could fix it. And then ultimately I was like, but your machine might just be like your little baby and can't handle it. And maybe you want to get like a old vintage, all metal vintage machine, an old Sears or something. You can find them all over the place, and then just use that for top stitching because it'll have like the meat and the muscle to like get through a thick area like this.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many layers of fabric here. Like,
now there's like when you think about like all the seam allowances, and then it's like there might be at some point like 6 or 7 layers of like a very thick fabric.
Yeah.
So sometimes like machines just can't handle it, and I would say if it's like a cheaper new machine, like a lower end Janome or something, it might struggle. No like shade on Janome. No, like
it's usually how it is.
Yeah. But I do love canvas because it's not going anywhere. So another example of what you could do with canvas.
So cute.
Great for things like bags, but these are a little pair of shorts. So they're like really structured shorts. They really hold their shape because they've got that like thick canvas edge. So if you want to make a pair of shorts or bottoms or even a coat, that. And then I put denim here just for fun, but it's all the same kind of feedback I have about canvas.
I'm a denim girly. I love sewing with denim.
What about you? Do you have any favorite fabrics wovens that we didn't?
I mean, not that we haven't talked about. I love denim. I also love a blend, like a cotton linen is one of my favorite blends. But I'm more of like the like really structured wovens, bottoms. I love sewing pants. Always, I'm like, that's just like delightful to me. Like I love wearing drapey fabrics. Don't love to sew it.
Yeah, it's true. I'm trying to think if I've ever even seen you in a drapey dress that you sewed.
I sewed one recently that I love. I'll put it on the screen, and it's in like the dotty viscose that we have, and then like the green one. And it was a slip dress on the bias, and I didn't enjoy that experience at all. But the dress felt beautiful.
I think that's the thing a lot of the times with drapeys is like you don't have the best time sewing it, but then when it's done, you're so happy.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just like a project sew and not a product sew and not a pleasure
and not a not a pleasure sew. Yeah. Okay, so those are some of my favorite fabrics. Hit us up in the comments if you have any other fabric questions.
What's your favorite fabric?
Yeah, what's your favorite fabric?
Let us know.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.